James Blake, Overgrown.
Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new James Blake LP, Overgrown. James Blake is a multi-talented musician hailing from the UK. He's an electronic music producer, as well as a singer, piano player, songwriter, and after some really admirable EPs, which kind of dabbled in the musical styles of future garage, a little bit of dubstep, a little bit of wonky in 2010, he went on to make a huge splash in 2011 with his full-length self-titled debut. And I really liked this LP when I first reviewed it, but it ended up growing on me just a little bit further and ended up being unquestionably one of my favorite albums of that year. Mostly because of the album's creative production, its emotive singing, and kind of radical variety among this array of tracks. Through the songs he released on this LP, James has proven that he exists uniquely on this weird border between electronic tinkerer and singer-songwriter. James brings these two worlds together in a way that's exciting and refreshing and intriguing. Surprising his listeners is something I hope James Blake continues to do on further releases, even as, on his new LP, Overgrown, he seems to come together with a pretty uniform set of tracks, and shoots for that kind of standard 10-song formula that is not too long, not too short. Just like on James Blake's previous stuff, there are elements of piano, singing, ballads, electronics too, but James doesn't really dip too far into any one of those directions to the point where the album feels unpredictable or sort of disjointed, which was kind of a quality that the self-titled album had. However, I don't think he's becoming dull on this new LP though. James definitely takes some risks, but still ends up with a pretty smooth auditory ride, like the song Take a Fall For Me, which has these dreary pianos on the track, these weird pitch-shifted samples, what seem to be saying, "He's gonna marry her," a very subtle beat, and as this instrumental continues, it appears that the wu-tang's RZA is featured on the song, does a couple verses on this thing, and he really doesn't stick out on the album in a bad way. He actually seems to conform to James Blake's style really nicely. I can't see why what RZA does on this track wouldn't vibe with you, unless you're totally against rapping and hip-hop altogether. RZA's bars on this track are heartbreaking, and the emotion that he's displaying in his verses, it's almost as if just this woman that he loves leaving him and just no chance of ever loving her existing forevermore. It's like the end of the world. The song Retrograde is kind of another risk for James, where he goes completely R&B, which is definitely an influence that has appeared on his previous tracks, but not so strongly, not as strongly as what he's showing on this song. The song is a really pretty ballad. I love James's vocal melody, the one that he hums right at the start of the song, and the way the track progresses is nice too. The chorus is really climactic, with James reaching into his upper register, singing in this very sharp, pinched voice, ending with this huge synth swell as previous tracks that he had written, especially on the self-titled LP, end as well. It's a really moving single, and there are other tracks on here that are just as concise, not quite as abstract, strange, or obtuse as songs on the self-titled. I'm talking about songs like Life Around Here or I Am Sold. Maybe the difference with these tracks though is that they're a little bit icier because of their atmospheric electronics. And there are other tracks on here like Digital Line, which are every bit as much a ballad, but toward the end of the song, the track seems to go on kind of an electronic odyssey. The one downside on this LP is James seems to bring these two worlds, this singer-songwriter and this electronic world, closer together. They don't always meld perfectly. There are songs like Overgrown, as well as the last track on this LP too, where James writes a pretty good tune, but it meanders a little bit and doesn't stay as interesting toward the end as it is in the beginning, despite having some very pretty piano sounds. He doesn't really seem to tie up these tracks with interesting endings or even structure them in a way where toward the end of the song I really get any kind of closure. The way these songs finish and sort of fade out, it almost feels as if they could kind of go on forever, the way James leaves them off. Plus, a handful of tracks on this thing do end in that synth swell climax formula that Retrograde kind of follows, but none of them really sort of reach the excitement Retrograde quite did when it did its thing. Plus the track Voyeur, where James takes that formula where he grabs a vocal snippet of himself singing, sort of repeats it throughout the track as he progresses the beat. This track, it's not really one of his best in this style, not one of the most enthralling. For the most part, especially toward the end of the song, it seems so dense, cacophonous, and just not interestingly layered. More elements of this track I feel work against each other than complement one another. And once again, the lone short piano ballad that James seems to kind of toss in on this track of 10 songs proves to display him as a good singer, and he can certainly play piano, but it just sort of runs around a lot of the same chords that he typically plays with when he does something in this style. Hardly throwing anything at the listener that makes me feel like he's sort of evolving this part of his persona that he seems to be so passionate about displaying. Though I do have my issues with this LP, I think a majority of the songs on this album are real displays of beauty. I will say this album is not as adventurous as his self-titled debut though. James Blake, while he is still a good producer and still really meticulous about the sounds that he crafts and where he places them, his productions don't seem as out there, as bold, or as unorthodox on this new LP, making it just a little less thrilling. Overall, I'm feeling a decent, strong 7 on this LP. If you've given it a listen, what did you think of it? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Why? What do you think I should review next? And that's it. James Blake, Overgrown, forever.